book. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me here. I am very excited to be here. What I want to start off with is talking about joy and happiness. Now, happiness is a big buzz out there, and everyone wants to get happy. And where's the happiest place in the world? Disneyland. But there's something different between happiness and joy. Happiness tends to be something that we seek outside of ourselves, or it's something that we want right in a tangible moment. If I had a new sweater, if we got rid of the COVID environment, if I got a new house, a new job, if my husband would change his ways, I would be happy. The problem with happiness is it ends up going away because of impermanence, meaning it's a state of mind that we get, and then when it leaves, then we have suffering. So happiness and suffering actually go together because life is impermanent. It is always changing. But joy embraces the change. Joy accepts the impermanence. Joy is knowing that even though I might have failed in something, I can get up and I can learn some more. Joy is knowing that even though I might be sick and not feeling well, I have people who care about me. Joy is the state of knowing of the grander scale of the divine inside of you. No matter what the environment is, that you have the inner power, just like we did in the meditation, to bring forth more light, that we can learn more information, that we can help other people. Joy is the essence of the in-breath and the out-breath. It's not about having something. It's about waking up to something. And this is why I like to talk about joy, because joy is about taking lemons and making lemonade. Joy is about celebrating the healing from the pain or the illness. It's about working hard for the right reason, or marching for the right reason, even in the cold. It's when you want to do something because you know it's for the better good, even beyond your own ability to feel warm or safe. You can go out there and you can care. Joy is also when you're holding someone and you're grieving, but you're happy that you were able to, and joyful that you were able to love. Like they said it with the Sidney Poitier, it's sadness, suffering that he died, but it's joyful that he, and happiness that he existed. So this is where joy comes from. This wonderful book I'm holding up, The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And they did not necessarily live happy lives, but they lived life of joy. Desmond Tutu worked through the apartheid. He also had TB. He had prostate cancer. He had an abusive family when he was young. The Dalai Lama, he ended up obviously being the head of Tibet and then having to leave Tibet and go to India. A lot of their friends were murdered. A lot of their friends were hurt. That is sorrow. That is suffering. But they are joyful men. So they came together to have dialogue on how do you get joy? How do you cultivate joy, even in unhappy times, even during a pandemic? Even if the doctor called and gave you news that you didn't want to hear, how do you cultivate joy? And they came up with 8 pillars. The first pillar is perspective. The second pillar is humility. The third pillar is humor. And the fourth pillar is acceptance. Those 4 are qualities of the mind. Then they came up with 4 qualities of the heart, which is forgiveness, compassion, gratitude, and generosity. And they said, when you're able to cultivate, and you don't have to cultivate one, you can cultivate more than one, you can cultivate them all. But while you're working on them, the byproduct is joy. It's joy. And this is their message. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about perspective and how important having different perspectives allows you to cultivate joy in your life. I heard a wonderful story. I found this acorn up in Ojai, but the top fell off. So the story goes is that a sage was walking with one of his students through a forest. And the sage bent down, picked up an acorn, and looked at his student and said, "What do you see?" The student knew that this was a trick question. "What do you mean, what I see?" He knew it was a seed, but he thought. And he said to the sage, "I see a tree." The sage said, "Yes. Yes, I see the tree too. I see the potential of this acorn." The student was so pleased with himself. He's like, "Oh, I got this one right." They continued to walk. The sage held up the acorn again and said, "Do you know what else I see?" The student looked at the acorn and said, "No." He said, "I see a forest." The student said, "Yes." It is perspective. What do you see when I hold up this acorn for you? Do you see food for a squirrel? Do you see the potential of a tree? Do you see shade for deers? Do you see a place where birds can nest? Do you see a tree that will make more acorns, that will make a forest and will help our environment and bring oxygen into the air? It's all perspectives, all perspectives. In the book on page 194, it says, change the way you see the world, and this will change how you feel and act, and this itself will change the world. Who changes? We do. Who chooses to change? We do. Life is always changing, but you can consciously change. You can consciously see the world as a limited belief that this is just a seed, or you see it as a forest that builds oxygen and has places for animals to live and potential for so many to build homes and feed many. The Buddha said, within our mind, we create our own world. And this is why they made perspective in the book as the first pillar, the very first pillar. The Dalai Lama said, what I want you to do is take an issue, something that is going on, and see it from 6 different sides. See it from all different angles. And then make your choice. Open your mind to learn and to grow. So the first perspective we all have is our human DNA from our brain. We all have the bias, the human bias that is really based in the brain that's negative. This human bias is a mechanism for us to stay safe. We're always watching out for dangers. We're always over categorizing. I can't go there, maybe not that. And what it does is it leads to a lot of fear. But humans have this, and all living animals have it. And it's not a bad thing, but you have to be aware of it, that you have that negative bias within you. And that is the first perspective in the fight, flight, freeze response that goes off. So that is one perspective. Then we have another perspective, the things we've learned. Our collective consciousness, what your family has taught you, what your neighbors taught you, what the United States has taught us. And that is being bombarded, and they will take these different people and environments will take your perspective, often because they want your attention, like the news. So they'll highlight the danger to activate the fight, flight, and freeze response within you, and you end up being squirrel, and you follow along. but it is a perspective that is around us all the time, and we have to be very, very aware of it. Then we have another third perspective, which is our own self, is making the choice and saying, I am Lindsay Leinbach, and I am a human being that has the capability to not be led by my nose or be led by my fears, but be led by my choices and by my thinking, by my equanimity, by my discernment, by a non-judgmental mind. I can choose what I like from my heart and from my mind. And this is quite beautiful. But then we have a fourth perspective where we can break away from this egocentric me, I, what do I think, into the we. Into the we. What is good for all of us? The we perspective. I wanted to read something really briefly from the we perspective in the Book of Joy. This is from the Dalai Lama. It says, the Dalai Lama used the terms wider perspective or larger perspective. They involve stepping back within our own mind to look at the bigger picture and to move beyond our limited self-awareness and our limited self-interest. With the wider perspective, we can see our situation and all those involved in a larger context and from more neutral position. By seeing the many conditions and circumstances that have led us to this event, we can recognize that our limited perspective is not the truth. As the Dalai Lama said, we can even see our own role in the conflict or misunderstandings. It goes on to saying that when we actually can let go of our limited I perspective and we can go into the we perspective, one thing that's so good about the book, it gives a lot of science behind it, that we are healthier people. So on page 199, the scientists found that people who more frequently said I, me, or mine had a higher risk of having heart attacks and had a higher risk of heart attacks being fatal. He found that this so-called self-involvement was a better predictor of death than smoking, high cholesterol levels, high blood pressure. More studies conducted by the researchers found that people who more often used first-person singular words, I and me, are more likely to be depressed than people who use words like we and us. So not only does the perspective of coming out to the collective consciousness of we-ness, of caring for others, of not only being there for myself, by able to see the we and the us and the beauty in that, I get healthier. I am less depressed. So now we have talked about that we have the human nature section. We have with the fight, flight, and ego, the bias of the negativity that we have to watch out, but we have that perspective. We also have the learned perspective of what is going on. We've talked about the we perspective. That's great for our health and others, but then we have the God perspective, the larger picture. And if you don't use the word God, you can use the word universe. And if you don't want to use the word universe, you can use observer. But when we become outside of ourselves and when we know that there is good in all things, that they might not be awakened to it, but we are, and that we can resonate at that level, then what is our perspective? That's when we're connecting our mind and our heart together. So I say to you, when we're looking through this and you say, but Lindsay, I don't know how to get these perspectives. What should I do? Well, then ask these questions. Ask these questions to yourself. What would you do if you had no fear? If you could drop fear? This would be giving you empowerment, and this empowerment would give you joy. How about this one? What does the opposition thought pattern of mine, what is the opposite? Look at that perspective. Look at that perspective. That opens your ability to be the observers in a non-judgmental way. Look at it from their point of view. This will give you compassion in your heart. Look about the future. What would I think about this situation 5 years from now? This gives you the joy of hope. How about this one? What is the perspective from a wise sage that I respect, or a wise person? What would Jesus do in this? What would Buddha do? What would the Dalai Lama? What would Archbishop Tutu do? What would my Uncle Fred do? Whoever you find wise, look from the perspective of them. What would they say to you? And then you will have insight and wisdom and joy be the byproduct from this information. How about this? What would a child do? We get so wrapped up in our stories. I'm this adult and blah, blah, blah. Go down to what would a child do in this situation? Open your path into beginner eyes. See the mystery of life. See the miracle of life. Let go of the limitations and say, maybe it can. See the curiosity like a child. Look at it from that area. The byproduct of that is always joy. Always joy. How about this one? What would my dog do? I love that one. What would my dog do? What is the perspective of my dog? That gives me two byproducts of joy. I'll tell you how. One is it gives me the byproduct of joy because it pulls me in the present moment. And the present moment is where you have the power to make a choice to do something different. Also, what would the byproduct of my dog do? Gives me humor, which happens to be the second pillar from the Book of Joy. Because the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Tutu know it's so important that we don't get morose. We have to be able to look with the eyes of the miracle, the eyes of curiosity, the eyes of beauty, the eyes of kindness, the eyes of love. And that happens with a smile. So going to something that gives you some sense of humor lightens the load of the fear, of the pain, of the anguish, and allows some light in for you to be able to see the perception of the positive, the kindness, and the joy. So it's important when we go through these ones, we want to remember we have one other special perspective that we can do. We can ask a friend, community. You can ask someone in the congregation. You can ask your mother. You can ask your best friend. What would they do? Because when we get very stuck, and it's very hard to get out of our feelings, it's hard to change our feelings, but it's much easier to change our thoughts. So if we can think, I want to know something new in a perspective, we ask someone their opinion. Can you please tell me a different perspective in this situation? I don't understand. I don't understand. I can't see it from anywhere else because I am in so much pain right now. I am so trapped. I don't feel good. I feel sick. I'm overwhelmed. I am grieving. Then you ask someone else, help me see it from a different point of view. Help me see the humor in it. Help me see the light in it. And from this, you get that byproduct of joy. Joy is a magnificent way to live your life. It is when you enter into the flow, and the more joy you have, and the more flow you have, what happens is the more generosity you have. And generosity is actually the 8th pillar. It's the ability to give. And when you have joy and you cultivate, you give it out. Yes, you can give money and that feels good. You can give time and that feels good. You can give a smile and that feels good. But when you start giving, then what happens is your perspective is your mind. It goes into your heart. You open up that joy and you give and you go into action. When I was listening to the sorrows and the happiness, people were talking about actions that they did. They were doing the action of writing it down so they could share it. They were bringing their love and their thought and their joy, even in sad times, to the community. And they were giving generously. They were connecting. They were caring. So when you go through and you think about joy today, think about it as a byproduct, not like happiness, not like you're going to Disneyland, not like you're getting a new sweater or even eating your favorite piece of pie. That joy is actually something that you're in the flow of. It's like being in the Tao, in the flow, being in the flow, allowing it, having the flexibility, having the self-confidence that no matter what comes around, you're going to make it. And if you don't know how, you can ask someone and have community to help you get there. Joy is about the expression of love, even when life is suffering. Love and joy coexist. So today I want to thank you so much. Remember, like the Dalai Lama, when you have a situation, it's a present. Look at it from 6 different ways. My dog, your wisdom person without fear, like a child, like my higher self in the future, many ways. And when you don't, reach out and ask someone to help you. And then take it into action, into generosity, and give out. The person who has the most joy from doing this will be you. I want to thank you all for being here. I love the perspective of the Unitarian Universalist Church because it honors all perspectives. The first pillar of joy. Namaste.